Welcome to the Demonic Spotlight, where we look at the changing face of the demonic throughout history. Our very first spotlight ever is on, what else? The devil. However, the devil plays such a significant role in Christianity that it's difficult to capture it all in one go. As a result, I'm going to split our discussion of the devil into several different elements. For today, we're going to cover a kind of interesting initial question. Just where does the devil come from? So if you happen to have a church background, you might be thinking, well, the beginning, he's in Genesis. Well, hear me out. Let's take a look and see. So Genesis 3 starts out in the following way. Quote, "Now the serpent was more crafty than any of the wild animals the Lord God had made. He said to the woman, 'Did God really say you must not eat from any tree in the garden?' The woman said to the serpent, 'We may eat fruit from the trees in the garden, but God did say you must not eat from the tree that is in the middle of the garden, and you must not touch it, or you will die.' 'You will not certainly die,' the serpent said to the woman, 'for God knows that when you eat from it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil.'" End quote. So what's going on here? Well, we have clear indications that the serpent here is both a wild animal, the wiliest of the Pantontontherion, and a thing that was created by God. This is, in fact, the same language used when talking about God's creation of the animals. When God makes Panta ta theria, the only difference being the declension in the Greek. So we have a regular snake, just one who happens to be able to talk. Oh, also, he's got feet and hands, but we'll get back to that in just a second. So then the primordial couple eat the apple. God comes back to the garden, and he is pissed. He calls out Adam and Eve, and they pass the buck from one to the other down to the serpent. And then God pronounces his first curse. Quote, "Because you have done this, cursed are you above all livestock and all wild animals. You will crawl on your belly and you will eat dust all the days of your life. I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and hers, and he will crush your head and you will strike his heel." That'd be kind of a weird curse to direct at the devil, right? It's almost like we would have to assume God doesn't really realize that the devil's the snake. Like he's got a pair of dark sunglasses on, hiding his identity, and God doesn't recognize him. Moreover, we're still using that same language of wild animals. But let's move on to this crawl on your belly thing. Isn't the snake already crawling around on its belly? Well, no, not necessarily. So to understand this, we have to switch to what Esther Hamori would address as one of God's monsters, the seraph or the seraphim. I've got a video on this one, so I'm just going to cut to the chase. The seraphim are winged serpents. And when we go to Isaiah 6, we find the following. Quote, "Above him were seraphim, each with 6 wings. With 2 wings they covered their faces. With 2 they covered their feet. And with 2 they were flying. And then one of the seraphim flew to me, having in his hand a live coal, which he had taken with the tongs from the altar." As the text suggests, and as Hamori confirms, the seraphim, presumably a serpentine form that was not cursed during the fall, have both hands and feet. Okay, so the devil's not in Genesis, but what about Job? Job is pretty explicit after all. Job 1:6 says, quote, "One day the angels came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came with them." End quote. Seems pretty cut and dry. But here we have to think about some of Hamori's ideas again in God's monsters. She points out that how we are taught to read a text is important, because every act of reading is really an act of interpretation. That is, we don't just get thoughts beamed directly into our heads from a book. We sift our reading through multiple layers of ourselves and other people, informing it with our own ideas and life experience, the things we've been taught before. In this light, Let's shift to that footnote that often appears on Satan in that passage. It usually reads something like, quote, "The Hebrew word Satan means adversary," end quote. Okay, that is, Satan isn't so much a proper name, but a title. He's not Satan, he's the Satan, specifically a legal adversary, a person who brings suit against someone. In this case, he brings suit against humankind. So what happens in Job? Well, basically, if we want to get a quick kind of modern rundown, God's having this massive cocktail party. All his kids, literally the sons of God, come to hang out, and the Satan is right there with them. God calls the Satan aside for a martini, and as he's chewing his olive, he sort of offhandedly mentions, "Hey, I know you're the guy who brings suit against mankind. Seriously, how awesome is Job?" Then the Satan replies, "Well, sure, but you give the guy everything he wants. I bet you if you took it all away, he wouldn't be so good." God ponders that for a minute and replies, "Well, let's just test that out. Why don't you go screw him a little bit?" See, here's the thing. While it might be the Satan doing all the bad stuff to Job directly, killing his family, destroying his houses, inflicting boils on him, it's really God who's commanding it to happen. Now, some of you might be shocked at this, but again, that's how we're often taught to read the text. We want to see a Christian God, one based on Plato's ideas of the good inside of this text. We want to rationalize his behavior somehow as part of a greater good, because God can't possibly be evil, right? Well, turns out Hebrew Bible doesn't really require anything like this. Take Isaiah 45 to 6 to 7, where God says, and I quote, "That they may know from the rising of the sun and from the west that there is no one beside me. I am the Lord, and there is none else. I form the light and create darkness. I make peace and create evil. I, the Lord, do all these things." I create evil. There it is. Hebrew Bible doesn't need a devil because God doesn't need the competition. So where does the idea of the devil start to form? Well, it actually starts from a tremendously popular text that is an offshoot of Genesis 1, First Enoch. In Genesis 6, we get this really weird story. Quote, "Now it came to pass, when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born to them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were beautiful, and they took wives for themselves of all whom they chose. There were giants on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. Those were the mighty men who were of old, men of renown." First Enoch is a text that purports to expand on this brief legend of angel sex and the giants, the Nephilim, as they're called, the mighty ones. In it, the angels that are assigned to watch over humanity start to lust after women. Needless to say, they're not really supposed to be doing that. Their leader, Semyaza, sort of organized this little rebellion from God's plan, and the watcher angels start to take wives and teach them things they shouldn't know, like warfare and how to put on makeup. One of Semyaza's chief helpers is a name you may or may not recognize from popular culture, Azazel, or as he's sometimes pronounced, Azazel. Of course, God finds out. He brings Enoch to act as a messenger for him, and then he rains proverbial hellfire down on the watchers for their disobedience. He brings the flood to wipe out the children of the angels, and Semyaza and Azazel get singled out for a special punishment, buried beneath the earth until the great judgment, when they'll be tormented forever in fire. God really knows how to work those punishments in Hebrew Bible. Maybe you're starting to see some roots here. So we've got a super powerful set of angel figures who are bound beneath the ground, where we traditionally understand hell to be, because they defied God's plan. Here's another piece. See, the giants can't really be killed. they, just like the angels, can never really die. Since they're part flesh and part spirit, they'll persist indefinitely, just without any bodies. As 1 Enoch 15 explains, quote, "And now the giants who are produced from the spirits and flesh shall be called evil spirits upon the earth, and on the earth shall be their dwelling. Evil spirits have proceeded from their bodies because they were born from men, and from the holy watchers is their beginning and primal origin." So what does that mean? It means that as soon as the children of the watchers died, their spirits started to flit invisibly all over the earth. And what are they set up to do? Well, later on, "And the spirits of the giants afflict, oppress, destroy, attack, do battle, and work destruction on the earth, and cause trouble. They take no food, but nevertheless hunger and thirst, and cause offenses. And these spirits shall rise up against the children of men and against the women, because they have proceeded from them." They're there to torment people. Bodiless evil spirits that afflict men and women? Yes, please. Demons in a nutshell, am I right? Still, we want to see them commandeered towards some kind of a purpose. Maybe with a leader? I don't know, perhaps with a portion of them consigned to a hell realm while the rest get to go free and torment mankind? If that rubbed you just the right way, you want the Book of Jubilees, or as it's sometimes called, the Lepto or Little Genesis. Here the story plays out much like in 1 Enoch. Watchers, angel sex, giants, flood, evil spirits, all the good stuff. But then, when the angels are about to be consigned to the place of condemnation, Mastema shows up. Mastema, Hebrew for hostility, is our first real devil. When he arrives in Jubilees, he asks God to give a portion of the demons to him. Quote, "Lord, Creator, let some of them remain before me, and let them hearken to my voice, and do all that I shall say unto them. For if some of them are not left to me, I shall not be able to execute the power of my will on the sons of men. For these are for corruption and leading astray before my judgment. For great is the wickedness of the sons of men." Then we move to God talking. "And he," capital letter he, "said, let the 10th part of them remain before him, and let 9 parts descend into the place of condemnation." So now we've got an evil figure who is, pardon the expression, hell-bent on corrupting mankind, an army of demons to do it with, and a legion of demons locked beneath the earth in a place of condemnation. And with a date of about the 2nd century BCE or so, it was just in time for the New Testament to draw on. Then we get the devil of the New Testament, which we'll talk about in our next spotlight on the devil. Until next time, this is At That Demon Prof. Don't forget to like and subscribe.